I brought in a seed variety called Kernza. It's a perennial wheat. If anybody has any experience with that, or you hear about that, go look at it. Think about it. You're growing wheat, but you don't have to reseed it every year, right? A perennial wheat, pretty cool stuff. Have you guys heard about Elon Musk's new big prize? You get $100,000 or something if you can come up with a new technology to sequester carbon. You guys heard of that? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try and get it. I'm using a new technology, solar-powered energy converters. Okay? They are self-replicating, completely portable, and they use no fossil fuels. Okay? It sounds like it's going good, right? Good so far? Okay. Converts solar energy that is locked up in an unusable form into a nutrient-rich energy source. It's amazing. You know the byproduct? 100% of it can be used as a soil health improvement treatment. For some of you, I might have to spell that out. Okay, solar-powered energy converters. We got hundreds of thousands of them. We don't need to invent something new. They're self-replicating, right? Nutrient-rich energy source and the byproduct. Okay? It's amazing stuff, amazing stuff. We need these animals. The world is trying to get rid of them, and it's very frustrating to me because they are a keystone species in a grassland environment. They're necessary. We have to have them. Okay, so I'm not going to go into a grazing talk here today, but I am going to talk mostly about animal impact and then start talking about some carbon and some other things. But the basic grazing concepts that I deal with on my ranch, I'm a grazer, I'm not a grain farmer. Basic concepts are the graze period, rest period, animal impact, stock density, and soil armor. Okay? Again, spells out grass. If you can't remember it, G-R-A-S-S. And I didn't come up with that. There was an 8-year-old in one of my classes one time that told me it spelled grass, so I had to rearrange the letters to make them work. Graze period, the amount of time your animals are on a paddock, right? You have to have that short enough to prevent the second bite. Okay? We want to make sure that the plants, after they're grazed the first time, don't have time to put up a new leaf when the animals are still out there. So you have to get the animals off before the new leaf comes up. Okay? That's the key to it. Rest period, you have to have the animals off of that pasture long enough that the plants can have full recovery, right? Get the root systems to full recovery. Animal impact, we're going to talk about that today. Stock density, we want to have the stock density high enough to get the benefits. The two benefits you get is better manure distribution, so manure and urine spread around the field better, and you get better plant utilization. So ideally, high stock density, every plant gets knocked down. Okay, low stock density, they pick and choose. So that stock density is important. And building a soil armor. Soil armor is so important for water, for temperature regulation, for all sorts of things. So we want to make sure we build that soil armor. So real quick on the grazing, I'm going to focus on animal impact though today. Okay. I used to talk all the time in my schools about physical animal impact, how important that is. It's the physical stimulation on the soil by the animal's hooves. Okay. It can cause break up capped soil. It can cause seed to soil contact, right, to get a new generation of plants coming. And it can recycle that material, push that litter down to where the biology is to get them to recycle it. Okay, that's the physical, and that's what I used to talk about all the time. I was missing the biological animal impact. Okay, that is so important in our systems. The ruminant animal is a keystone species in a grassland environment. The world is trying to say that they're damaging the environment. In a well-managed system, they enhance an environment. They develop it. They bring more diversity to it. A quick example, a cow patty is home to over 350 species. It's home, right? You remove the cow patty from the equation, there's 350 species that are no longer in your ecosystem. Okay? They're enhancing it. They're improving it. There's a symbiotic relationship with the biology of the ruminant and the biology in the soil. Okay? We heard earlier that how important that biology in the soil is. Well, guess how we get it there, right? We bring in the ruminants. The manure in the urine, there's food for biology and there's biology in that have this symbiotic relationship with the soil. The saliva, the phlegm, right? There's even biology that falls off the hair coat of the animals that stimulates the soil. So it's really important. I'm not a grain farmer, but I'm working with grain farmers. I think every acre of land, including every acre of grain land, should have ruminant animals on it at some time, right? Maybe not every year, but get animals out there. That's so important to get it stimulated. That biological is so important. Okay, modern agriculture, it's all about fertilizer. I like your slide today. He took it in more detail than I'm going to today, but it's the same idea. I used to work at a fertilizer dealership when I was going to college, and I loved it. It was so cool. They always had this barrel on the wall. I don't know if you guys seen this barrel before. Okay, so the law of the minimum. These two guys fight over who invented it, but I don't think they fight very hard anymore because I don't think they're really not around anymore. But the law of the minimum, basically it's the weakest link, right? Your crop will only grow to whatever point is the most limiting nutrient, right? So in this barrel, just as an example, what's the most important nutrient we need to add to the soil? Phosphorus, somebody said? Anybody else? It's water. It's pouring out of the barrel. I love this barrel. It's running off your land. Okay? If you get a soil test report back that says you need 50 pounds of nitrogen to grow X bushels or X tons of forage, equivalent, you need 10,000 pounds of water. Not even close. 50 pounds, 10,000 pounds of water. A lot of people argue, well, water's not a nutrient. Nitrogen is an element. Hydrogen is an element. Oxygen is an element. It just happens to be two elements combined. And like you said, they make up a majority of that plant. Okay? 97.5% of the nutrients that grow up every plant, every tree, every weed comes from the air. But we're so worried in modern agriculture about managing what's in the soil. Okay? There are multiple lifetimes worth of nutrients in your soil. The problem is they're not available. Right? You get this soil test report that says available phosphorus, available calcium. Joe Williams has a couple of these charts. I'll put up one of them here for you. Calcium, available, 5,000. Actually there is almost 39,000. Okay, every one of these. It's crazy. Available versus what's actually there. Ask yourself why it's not available. Biology, right? We have dead soil. We've got to get that biology in there. We don't have a fertility issue in agriculture. We have a biological issue. We need to stimulate the biology, and I'm a very strong believer that we need the ruminant animal out there to get it triggered. Okay, we got to get them on there. There was a saying many, many years ago that the light bulb did not get invented by incrementally increasing the brightness of the candle. Okay, we didn't have a candle that we made a little bit brighter, a little bit brighter, a little bit brighter, and boom, there's a light bulb. No, it was a completely new idea. And that's what we need right now in agriculture. We need a new idea. Right? Modern agriculture is stuck in monoculture control. Right? Regenerative agriculture to me is a brand new idea, and it's making leaps and bounds right now. Boy, 5-10 years ago, this was banging my head against the wall trying to do these talks. Now it's a lot more popular. We are growing much faster, exponentially. So, incremental increases, right? We got to get that out of our thought process, right? You want to go out and buy a brand new bull, right? Go to that bull sale and get a bigger bull. Well, you're going to get a little bit higher weaning weights, maybe. So that's an incremental increase. It's not going to make or break your farm. If your farm's losing money, like the graph that we saw this morning, that's not going to make your farm profitable. Or get a new variety of seed, right? It's going to be an incremental increase. That's not going to make or break your farm. Okay, we need a whole new idea, a whole new direction. What about doubling your effective rainfall? Wow. Okay. What about having an organism in the soil that can make water for you? Did you know arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi can actually pull hydrogen and oxygen out of the air and make water and give it to your plant? That's pretty cool. Doesn't even have to rain if you have the biology. Really cool. So the answer's under our feet. We need to start managing the soil, and we need biology to do it. And I refer to big biology and little biology. Okay, the big biology is the ruminants. We need those to stimulate the little biology. How do we do that? We have a polyculture of plants that gets us a polyculture of root systems that gets us a polyculture of soil biology. Okay? It all has to work together. We can't just start, you just can't put in soil biology. We have to get the system working, the whole system. Okay? And then we need animals to manage that. And I don't care what kind of animals you're using, right? We can stimulate the soil with those livestock. Okay? Isn't that the cutest chicken picture you've ever seen? I did take that one. That is mine. It was cold out. So in agriculture, regenerative agriculture, my goal is to heal the soil and to rebuild the water cycle. You guys ever heard anything about, people are talking out there about climate change? You ever heard anything about that? Okay. We could make miraculous progress in what they're terming as climate change if we could do one thing. And it's so easy. It's so easy. We could fix the water cycle. We would reduce the number of droughts, the number of floods, the number of storms. We could reduce the number of fires, hurricanes, if we could fix the water cycle. It's easy. It's really easy to do. You want to know the hard part of it? We got to do it on a global scale. How do you convince everybody to do it when, most of modern agriculture is against what we're doing? Okay, that's the hard part. Fixing the water cycle is not that hard. Okay, so society right now is all about carbon. Carbon this, carbon that, carbon this, carbon that. Everybody's trying to look good in the eyes of carbon. What frustrates me is everybody is focusing on carbon emissions, right? The airline company that flies me around here, they're bragging they're going to be carbon neutral by, 2030, 2040, 2050. Okay? Are they ever going to get there? Never. They can't, because all they do is emissions. If we just slow emissions, we're just going to slow it down. We're still emitting. Carbon is a math equation. Okay? There's a law of physics. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes form. Right? You can't make carbon. You can't destroy carbon. All it does is change its part in the cycle. So if we're releasing carbon, right, we saw this morning how it's released through biology, through tillage, through all sorts of things. If we're releasing it, we have to sequester carbon at the same rate to become carbon neutral. It's just math. It's very simple. Okay? Most of agriculture is trying to look good. Right? They're trying to do research. They're doing single point measurements of how we can reduce carbon emissions. We're going to measure the cows burping. We're going to measure the cows farting. Okay? It's a waste of time. Carbon goes into a cow. It's got to come out. Where does it come out? It's not coming out the burping. It's coming out the farting. Maybe it's coming out in the meat, and then it's you and me doing it. Right? Carbon comes out if it goes in. There's no other way to do it. So, if we're releasing carbon, let's sequester it back. Agriculture is one of the few industries on the planet that has the ability to sequester carbon. Right? So instead of using cardboard straws that drive me nuts, I'm going to sequester more carbon. Fair enough? Okay. So agriculture can do this, but are we as an industry? Not even close. We are putting in so much emissions, tillage, releasing carbon from the air. We're not even close to carbon neutral, but we have the ability. So we ran our farm through a carbon calculator a few years ago. It was pretty in-depth. Took us an entire day to go through it and get it right. It talked about the fuel we burned, obviously, the amount of grass we're grazing, the amount of forestry area we manage, the solar panels we have, the batteries, the firewood we're burning. It was quite detailed. I'm not saying this is perfect, but if even if we're 25% out, we came back, our ranch was 94% sequestration and 6% emissions. Okay, 50-50 would be carbon neutral. We're way beyond carbon neutral, right? I don't feel bad using a plastic straw because we're sequestering a lot of carbon, okay? We have the ability to do this. Now, I'm not saying this is perfect. If I'm out by 25%, I'm still above carbon neutral, okay? So, old school academia, when I went to college, I was taught that it takes 100 years to grow an inch of topsoil, right? Anybody else ever heard that? I was just in Finland and Estonia. I did a conference over there, and one of the speakers came out and said, it takes 1,000 years to grow an inch of topsoil. I'm like, whoa, they're slower than us. We can do it in 100. Do you know they're wrong? For years, I thought that was true. Why even try, right? It takes so long. That's more than a lifetime. But they're wrong. And about 6 to 8 months ago, I had a leading researcher from the university who we were discussing carbon, and they kind of scoffed at me, right? Like, wow, it doesn't really matter. Carbon it takes 100 years to grow an inch of topsoil anyway. I'm like, no, we can do it a lot faster. And I had the University of Alberta come out and do a study. It was actually across the prairies, but I've got the numbers on my ranch that I'm going to show you right away. But we proved them that they're very wrong. Very wrong. So what is carbon sequestration? It's very simple. Photosynthesis pulls carbon out of the air into the plant. The plant forms it into glucose. That glucose is then pushed out into the soil by the root systems to feed the biology. And then we need the biology to do a conversion process for us and get it in a stable form in the soil. Forestry also sequesters carbon. They do it at a very high rate. Takes a long time, and then you've got a forest growing. Problem with that is it's not very stable. What happens when a forest fire hits? Right? That carbon gets released immediately. In the soil, if we can put the carbon back into the soil, we have a long-term stable form of carbon. Okay? Some of the mycorrhizae fungi can actually take the glucose, turn it into a product called glomalin, which is a long-term stable form. Right? It takes decades to break down. We want to keep that in the soil. We want that organic matter in the soil. Okay? So that's it. That's simple, right? Easy to do? No, it's a little bit of a slow process, though. So this is a soil pit that I dug. I love digging soil pits. You see this this triangle coming down here? There's one here, and there's another one right here. Okay, another one over here. That was a root system sticking down into our clay soil. Near Busby, we're very high clay soil. What we've done, though, is added glucose or carbon to the base. Okay? Old school academia is saying it takes 100 years to grow an inch of topsoil because they're banking on leaving residue on the top. Okay? And that residue breaking down, being decomposed by the biology. Most of that carbon volatilizes off into the air. It cycles above ground. Right? It's really important to leave the residue for water holding capacity and things like that. But that's not how I'm growing soil. I'm not growing soil on top. What I'm doing is pushing down into the base, whatever your base is. Do you have silt, sand, or clay, or any combination of that? And I'm adding carbon to it. I'm converting what the base is, and I'm turning it into topsoil. Okay, we can do that a lot faster than leaving residue on top. Okay, so here's the study that University of Alberta did. There was farms all across the prairies. What they did was they took they called it a adaptive multi-paddock grazing pasture right next to a continuously grazing pasture, okay? So every one of these dots had 2 fields at it. We are way up there in the top corner. We're the farthest northwest. That was my farm. Now, I don't have all the details from the study. If you want it, I can send it to you. Honestly, I wasn't overly impressed with the whole study. It didn't really, jump off the page at you or anything. But I think there was way too much diversity in the farms, right? It was crazy diversity on the management. So, but I did get my numbers. So here's my field. They called it adaptive multi-paddock grazing, and our neighbor's field. So they were chosen because of the similarities and the history. Gray wooded soil zone, we were forested. 100 years ago it was all forest. I'm going to say about 50 years ago, talking to the landowners there, about 50 years ago, both pieces were bulldozed and left. Too many rocks, too many hills, too many, for any cultivation. All they were was bulldozed and left, and then continuously grazed for like 40 years. Okay? 15 years before the end of this study, I had taken over this side. So 15 years ago, they all looked the same. Okay? And then I took over this side and did 15 years of an advanced grazing system. Okay? What do you guys think would happen? Obviously, ours looks a lot better now. They've got a lot of thistle and buttercup out there. That's their main crops. After 15 years, we took the soil organic carbon from 5.2% up to 11%. Okay? And you can drastically see the difference in the soil plugs. Okay? Virtually no AH horizon. You can't see it. It's all the same color. Okay? Now we have this very distinct AH horizon that averaged almost 11 inches. So in 15 years, we grew 11 inches of topsoil. A little better than academia, eh? It's still quite a while, but it's a lot faster. I've got a second study that we went from 3% to about 7.5% in 17 years. I don't have the data up here, but I've got the soil test for that as well. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive. We're growing soil. We're sequestering carbon, and now we're proving it. I didn't know I was doing this for years. I was just doing what my mentors had told me that we should be doing. And it's really cool now to get some of these results back that it's actually working. Okay. How about nitrogen? We saw in your slides this morning that the soil, the microbes, like to keep the soil at about 24:1, that carbon-nitrogen ratio, right? As my carbon went up, so did my nitrogen. Okay? So what happens if you lower your carbon in your soil? Your nitrogen lowers. Okay? So I do have the data. There's just the average I showed you. We can take a look at that in more detail if you want, but we do have the data. So here's the same field compared to a field down the road. I'm in the gray wooded soil zone. About 10 miles away from me is the line, or maybe about 8 miles away, is the line where the black soil zone starts. The good soil, right? $120 to $150 an acre to rent. The good stuff. We went down there to look at a soil, a trial area. I brought in a seed variety called Kernza. It's a perennial wheat. If anybody has any experience with that, or you hear about that, go look at it. Think about it. You're growing wheat, but you don't have to reseed it every year, right? A perennial wheat, pretty cool stuff. But I heard the root system was amazing on this. So after the second year that it was established in this plot trial, I wanted to go down and look at the root system. I said I wanted a good picture. So we went down there, got a backhoe guy in there to dig a hole. And I said, okay, we're in a zero-till grain farmer's field. Okay, I don't want to tick them off. So when we start digging, let's take the topsoil off and put it on this side. And then when we get the clay, we'll dig it and we'll put it on this side. Okay, and then when we put it back, right, we'll put clay down first, put topsoil back on top. Okay, good plan. We couldn't tell the difference. As he started digging, the color never changed in the pile. It was the same color all the way through. They have degenerated their land. This, expensive black topsoil land, we're at 11%, they're down to 4%. What happened to their nitrogen, right? That carbon-nitrogen ratio. As it went down, so does their nitrogen. Okay. I had one of the university professors come out to a pasture walk 2 years ago, and I put him in a soil pit. He was an expert on forestry soils. The first hole we put him in was in the trees where the pigs were grazing. So we got, he got in there and he was looking at, talking about all his different AH horizons and B horizons and all the different things over my head. I'm not a scientist, but he was in his glory there. He knew exactly what was going on. And he actually brought out all of the old land maps. Every land map you can imagine was on the table when we first got there. He knew exactly which piece of land we were on, exactly what type of soil was supposed to be there, right? It was all historic data. Put him in the second soil pit. And he basically kind of stopped and he didn't know what to say. He goes, this is not right. Something's wrong. We are in a gray wooded soil zone. This is class 4 soil. we are not supposed to have 12 inches of black topsoil here. Okay, so he was like, maybe there's something to this regenerative management. And I know for a fact now that professor teaches first-year soils in the University of Alberta. Okay, every first-year student that goes through there has to take that class. And he's now making all of them watch Kiss the Ground, so the movie. So that's a big step. I don't think I caused that, but it's good to hear that he's making them watch that. So we've got to start regenerating land, not degenerating it. Okay, it's a mindset shift. This is you know what? If you don't believe this, you're not going to do it, right? You've got to get that mindset shift. The way I describe this is modern agriculture grows plants from the soil, right? We put in a seed, we put in fertilizer, we grow a plant, and we harvest it off. The soil is just a medium. In regenerative agriculture, I believe that we need to grow soil from the plants. Okay, completely different way of looking at it. Every year, I'm trying to figure out how to grow more soil. How do I get more carbon? If I get more carbon, I get more nitrogen. If I get more carbon, I get more water holding capacity. I'm going to get a better crop. That 97.5%, that's what I'm targeting, not the 2.5%. Here's a quick example, really redneck. I got a quad-mounted spreader on the back of a pickup. I'm going to go out and seed, okay? Pretty low tech. That truck has a cassette player in it still. That's a selling feature to me. My SUV that's parked outside, cassette player in it still. Nice. I love it. Anyway, so I'm going to go out and seed this. 2019, took over a canola field, small canola field. It was actually canola back-to-back, 2 years in a row. A no-no, right? So we were going to go out there and spread a 21 different species mix. We just drove back and forth, right, aiming for the fence post. Aiming for the next fence post. How accurate is that? Not always great, eh? Sometimes I use a Valmar. Although on my pastures, when I'm using a Valmar, my land's really rough. I told you about bulldozing it and just leaving it. This spring I used a Valmar and I broke both arms off it. Had a little welding bill and some damage to the truck too, I'm sure. But however I get the seed out there, it doesn't matter. But this year with the canola, I used the spreader. Okay, seeded and or grazed about June 5th. Okay, so there was a little bit of rain forecasted, so again, moisture is a key to this, but had a little bit of rain coming. We put a 21 different species mix on canola stubble, and then I turned cows out to graze it in. Okay, an important part of that is we've got the manure and urine going out there too. The physical stimulation, their hooves are pushing those seeds in. The biological stimulation is we're stimulating that biology.
What did the cows actually have to graze?
Canola.
Just the canola?
Canola, volunteer canola. Don't stand behind them. They were runny. So I did about, I split it into about 5 pieces, and we did 2 days, 2 days, 2 days, 2 days to stomp it in. Now, I didn't think about it at the time, but the sunflowers that I put out there with it, man, there was a lot of birds out there right after. I'm like, oh, man. Okay, the big seeds the birds get, the little seeds they don't. So I did a bit of an experiment. There's the canola coming up. And so I started that June 5th. This was probably in July somewhere. Didn't graze it again until early September. This is what we had. Where'd the fertility come from? Left over from the canola, right? Come on, somebody say it. Left over from the canola. No, he cheaped out on his canola the last year. Okay, how about year 2? This is a bunch of annuals. The big one there you see is Japanese millet, but it was a tremendous mix of annuals, perennials, legumes, grasses. Year 2, the perennials come in, taking over. It's like an orchestra, right? Bring in the horns. No, bring in the perennials. Okay, they're coming in. My dog couldn't run through it. Look at all the nitrogen that we're bringing in there and the carbon. Okay. Year 3, oh, darn drought of 2021. We didn't have our water holding capacity built up. We just took over this land, right? So the drought did hit us. I'm going to say we have about 3 times as much as the neighbor, though, because we're in a 15 inches in the growing season. That's our rainfall. We had just over 3, so quite a drastic drop. but we still had way more than the neighbor. Well, there goes all the fertility, right? Oh, year 4. We're right back there. Okay. Where'd the fertility come from? Biology. It's always there. Right? 97.5% I'm getting from the air. Yes? One time. Seeded in 2019. Okay. So I've done this numerous times. My first cover crop, technically, I did in 2002. Anybody remember what happened in 2002? Drought. I had a beautiful crop of thistles, right? But boy, everything else kind of came in. I didn't do near the species mix as I am now, but that was my first one, broadcasting onto a grain field basically, and it came in. 3 years later, it's a beautiful crop. Okay. I've drilled once into a pasture. I don't have the equipment, right? I don't even own a tractor. I've been ranching for just about 25 years. I've never owned a tractor, so everything I do is cheap. Well, except for my new toy. It was not cheap. Okay, we'll talk about that. Okay, so all I'm trying to do is get this from the air, and I focus on carbon. Number one thing I focus on, getting carbon into my land, building my soil. So there's the Google Maps version of it. It's kind of entertaining. This first little bit, so what I tried to do was an experiment, always do an experiment. This piece over here was supposed to be all the little seeds. This piece over here was supposed to be all the little seeds and the big seeds. This was all the big seeds too. And then in the middle, I was supposed to leave an area that had nothing. I wanted to see the difference. If I don't seed it at all, how does just the animals out there grazing work? And big difference, right? Definitely worth seeding it. Definitely worth seeding it. But right here is where I had the neighbor's teenager driving for me. It was all over the place. Like I had little flags marked on fence posts here. Well, he started at this one and then headed to this one. I'm like, whoa. So once I got everything set, I'm like, okay, I'm driving. And I did this. And then my daughter came out and she helped me do this one. We went back and forth and back and forth. And then, yeah, we did this one. Couple of loops there, a little crooked, right? It's funny. 5 years later, driving by the highway here, you can still see these lines up here. Right? 5 years later, you can see the growth. And you can definitely see this gap in the middle. The gap was supposed to be a lot bigger. But anyway, always do experiments. I love it. But yeah, the neighbors love to talk about it. So I did get a little fancier, as you can tell. Now we're GPS coordinated. Man, is it ever straight. I love my straight lines now. Like I said, this thing flies at night really well. As long as I get the pasture set up in the daylight where I can see stuff, then I can let it run all night, and it's pretty slick. Guys like to spray at night too on this. Most of these are used for spraying. Right? When I actually bought this one, I bought the spreading unit with it, and LandView drones, right here by Camrose, that's who I bought it from. By the way, excellent customer service. They drove all the way up to Bonnyville to help repair my drone when I had problems with it. So excellent customer service, highly recommend them. But yeah, great. This is the smallest seeding drone that they make. This is a T10. The advantage of the T10 is that I don't need an advanced license to fly it. It's under the 25 kilogram. It's 24.9 kilogram. They actually send with a smaller tank. But I can put in six kilograms in this one. I think it normally would come in an 8 kilogram tank, but because we get under that 25 kilograms, then you only need a basic license to fly it. So there's the T10, the T20, the T30, and the T40. Right? You want to get your advanced license, you can go bigger and better and badder. But I can still seed at on average, about 15 acres an hour with this. So that's, for a broadcaster, that's pretty reasonable. You get to sit in a lawn chair most of the time, but you got to get up every 8 minutes. So you just kind of get comfortable and you got to get up again. So, all right. But yeah, just so you can see the size of it, I guess. I started working with a grain farmer, and we're starting to use the drone with him as well. So we're trying to top dress before the crop comes off. If we can get out there and get the seeds to, get some rainfall on them, get them germinated, and then they harvest the crop, we'll get a little bit of head start on that fall. And we've got such a short growing season, it's hard to get the roots in the ground. Okay, so this is brand new, right? First year I've done it. Did it work? No, we had 0 rainfall after I seeded, right? So we've got 300 acres of a cover crop out there that we might be harvesting for cover crop seed next spring or next summer because, yeah, it never germinated. But the idea is there, I might need to go a little bit earlier, try and get those seeds to germinate, and then when that crop comes off, we got green living, green plants out there, that living root in the soil, trying to hit that shoulder season to put exudates into the ground. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of cool. And I don't really fly it. Once you program it, it does all the flying for you. When it runs out of seed or it's getting low on battery, I just hit come home, and it flies home all by itself, lands where it took off from. I switch out the battery, I top up the seed and hit go, and it goes again, remembers where it stopped, and it just keeps going. So it basically flies itself. So I'm starting to work with I've been working with this grain farmer for a long time, but now I'm starting to work with him a lot more. He sees the value of this. Okay, he sees the value of cover crops. I think he heard Gabe Brown speak about 5 years ago, and that's what triggered it, right? It's amazing what that man can do. Actually, I've got one quote from Gabe Brown that most people don't hear. Not very many people quote this of Gabe Brown. Nothing builds soil faster than a well-managed perennial polyculture. Okay, everybody slides by that one in his presentation, but he's quite adamant about that. Cover crops are a huge step forward in the grain industry. But if you've got a nice, well-managed pasture, I would never rip it up and put in a cover crop. Right? I've been criticized before as, Steve, why don't you like cover crops? Oh, I do. In the right situation, they're a perfect tool. But I'm never going to rip up my pastures and put in a cover crop. Because look what I've already done. Nothing grows soil faster than a well-managed perennial polyculture. Okay? But in a grain operation, this is a huge step forward. Huge step forward. My farmer has about 10,000 acres that I work with, 5,000 in Saskatchewan and about 5,000 here. This chunk is about 1,200 acres together. This little piece here is a bunch of lowland that he complained that he never really made any money on it. And he wants to get cows over there so that we can get some poop and urine out on that land. Okay, so I took over that pasture, seeded it down, now we got a herd of cows there every summer. Okay, we've done crop residues. 4 or 5, 6 years ago, we did peas out there. We actually did some bunching. Anybody ever heard of a buncher? Sits underneath a combine and collects the chaff and straw and then dumps every once in a while. So you end up with these piles out in the field. So we used a version of the buncher because the actual buncher didn't work. We had to kind of build our own because peas are clingy. And when your peas are coming out and the buncher's trying to dump it, the peas are still clinging to the other peas that are still in the combine. So we actually had to rebuild one, but if anybody wants to see it, I can give you pictures of it later. But that worked really well. So he already harvested the peas, and then this is the bonus that he gets after. We get that manure and urine out there after as well. Okay. A couple years ago, we did a swath grazing year. He was starting to play with polycultures. Pretty big for a grain farmer. He had oats and peas together. Okay, and he's done piola quite a few times as well. He loves his piola. So, but the oats and peas came, and this was a few years ago when Saskatchewan and British Columbia were on fire. You guys remember what happened? The month of August was all smoke. We couldn't even see the sun. Well, my pastures stopped. My solar panels stopped charging batteries, and his crop stopped ripening. Basically, for the month of August, his crop just sat there. And he's like, well, these oats are never going to ripen. Let's graze it. So he got his crop insurance, and then we went out and grazed it. We grazed all winter. And he said that's the most profitable thing he's ever done. Okay, because it just worked out well for him. So we hit that whole 185 acres. Okay. We do something now, right now we're doing something called a graze follow. Okay, I don't know if that term has ever been up before, but that's what we're calling it. We used to summer fallow to rest land. Well, what we're doing is graze following. We're resting some grain land, giving it time to heal, but by putting in cover crops and grazing it every year. So we're on year 4. When he first started this, we agreed that we would do this for 4 years. And then on year 5, he would take it back. So, but he hasn't told me he's taken it back yet, so I better go talk to him. I got to make plans. But we took soil tests in advance, and we're going to take soil tests when we're done. And of course, his yield monitor is going to really tell us a lot. He said this soil just never produced like the other stuff did. Let's give it a try. If it works, he'll take this back and put it back into grain production and then give me another chunk, right? So hopefully we'll just keep moving around and hit more of his land. So we're doing this graze follow. And the videos that I'm going to show you are about the graze follow, but we'll get to them right away. We tried an intercrop here a few years ago. Problem was we hit the drought again. Drought of 2021 hit. He seeded his wheat, let it establish, came in and sprayed it, and then we GPS'd in between, and we seeded in a cover crop in the middle. It grew, but because of the drought, the wheat definitely had a head start and outcompeted it. By the time it got up in the fall, he did have some living root in the ground, not as much as we'd like. It wasn't worth it for me to take cows over, right? For the amount of work to put into it, it was just not worth it. So he still got some benefit. He had that root in the ground, but I didn't graze it that year. So partial success, partial not so. But we'll try it again. And then I did the 300 acres of drone seeding this fall. First time we did it. How many guys out here are innovators and early adopters? Do you know we make a lot of mistakes? Things that don't work out the way we plan? Well, there's another one of them. We give it a try. So I'm actually on the board of ARDAR, another one of the hats I wear, and I'm excited. I'm trying to encourage them, let's do some more research on regenerative agriculture, okay? Because the innovators and early adopters have been the ones doing the experiments, losing money, right? We're the ones that take the chances and the risks and try and experiment. If we could actually get some research dollars going into figuring this stuff out, we could do this exponentially, okay? So I'm really encouraging that and trying to get there. I mean, I'm in up to my neck in there, so I think it's important that I'm there. Okay, graze follows what like I said, we've been doing it for 4 years. This was one of the mixes that we used. I think you guys might recognize that. My grain farmer kind of picks what he did. The first couple years, he just picked whatever was in his, left over in his shed. So they weren't that, not as many species, maybe not the right ones. But now he's actually buying into this, and he's looking into, he contacted Covers & Co., and they got a blend for him. Okay, so this was in 2022, just a little bit of a flyover here. So this is a grain field that we're going to graze. So I have a pasture in the background here already, and there's actually some more down there. That field that he gave me is actually down the road a little bit. We do a cattle drive back and forth throughout the summer. But it came up pretty good, 2022. 2022 was a drought as well, but it was not too bad. This is a clay gumbo, he called it. That's why he wants to fix it. His yield doesn't do very well. Yes? How was it seeded? Pardon? How was it seeded? Yeah, this one was done with this big John Deere fancy, I don't know what it was, a disc drill. So I don't know the number, but. What do you call drought? Pardon? What do you call drought? So we get on average about 15 inches of rainfall. This year was probably 8 to 9 maybe. The year before was under 4. So 2021 was the worst drought. 2022 was dry, but 2019 and 2020 were wetter than ever, right? So very extreme. Was it just in the stubble, or was it oops. Or something? Yeah, he just zero-tilled right into his stubble of whatever the crop was before, right? So most of these now, it's been cover crop the year before. The first year, I don't remember what it was, but now it's been cover crop 4 years in a row. Different cover crops each time, different mixes, but so now we're just moving the cows. Okay. This year, we actually had a bunch of sunflowers come out there too. The turnips, same thing. They pulled the turnips out of the ground, left them on the ground, and then when you came back the next day, last thing they ate, the turnips were left on the ground. So, and there's a cross fence. I don't measure it, but we try and graze as much as possible. So what we were doing here, the pasture in the background was all lowland, right? It's all like reed canary grass and not very high quality. So what we were doing was letting them graze. That was in 3 pieces. So we'd give them that one piece of the low stuff, and then every day give them another chunk of this. We're trying to ration up, right? So they're eating lowland, they get some of this cover crop. The next day, get some cover crop. Go back and graze, get some cover crop. So it's a way to balance off their ration, but then we get really high stock density out here too and stomp that into the ground.
What would your stock density
This was about, what was it? Every year it's a little different. I had bred heifers there one year. This is cow-calf pairs. I think there was 45, and we're moving, every day. So it's fairly, I measure in animal days per acre, different than most people, so. Okay. It's daily, so it's not a fluctuation at all. We'll give it to them once a day, usually in the afternoon. So they'll get the good stuff in the afternoon, clean it up pretty good. In the morning, they get up, graze around whatever's left over, and then in the afternoon, they'll get another batch of good stuff. So every day, they have the same ration. Yeah, they always have access to the low-quality stuff. They can be in there all the time. It's just a way to use up the low quality, but still get them really good gains. Yeah. So if you did that on a 5-day graze period, yeah, it would be like this. So that's just Ferdinand. He loved his sunflowers. So what we need is a polyculture of plants, right? My goal is to get that polyculture of soil organisms. And in a grazing situation, I'm not as fussy about what the plant species are, because my polyculture is going to fix everything. Because all my land goes back into grazing, so it's going to be a polyculture, and I know I can manage it well, and I can grow soil like you've seen. Okay? If you're on grain land, you might need to get a little more specific on which species you're using. Okay? If you're needing calcium, or if you're needing something else, or nitrogen storage, or whatever. I'm not that very fussy. All I'm looking for is a mixture. So I want annuals and perennials out there, right? Those annuals come in, I'm putting in the weeds, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm putting in the weeds. That's all the annuals. Barley, oats, that's a weed, right? I want to cover the ground. The perennials come in next year and kind of take over, and then they're gonna fix that soil for me with those big root systems. I want tap roots and creeping roots. I want bunch grasses and creeping grasses, cool season, warm season, forbs and legumes. Different types of root systems are on. Barley and oats is the same type of root system, right? To me, it's a duplicate. I don't need both. I can just put one in. If I have both, who cares? I'm okay with that. But I want that variety, and that's what gets me the biology. With the stimulation by the animals, right? We still need that. We need that soil health improvement treatment. Okay? Very important. Very important. Anybody talking about the off-calf funding and the RALP funding here today? Are you? A little bit? Okay, I'm just going to real quickly then. I have never in 25 years seen so much money thrown at beneficial management practices, especially regenerative practices. Okay, some of these programs are amazing. I'm involved in the off-calf funding that the Canadian Forage and Grassland Association put on. And I'm actually kind of proud of it because they actually asked me, how should we set it up? So I said, okay, I got a few ideas. Okay? I've never before seen perimeter fencing included. I got it in. Perimeter fencing is included, as long as you have a good grazing plan. Okay? I've never seen labor and equipment paid for before. I got it in. Through the CFGA program, you can put a bill in for your labor and equipment costs, and they will pay 70% of it. Okay? I've never seen that before. I got it in. Yes, very soon it will open up. So ARDAR has a version of off-calf, and CFGA has a version of off-calf. ARDAR is for all three categories: cover crops, nitrogen management, and grazing. CFGA's is only for grazing. However, if you have a grazing plan, you're also eligible for perimeter fencing around your grain fields, which could be for your cover crops, right? So if you've got the grazing plan going in, that's only through the CFGA though. You can put in water systems. Now ARDAR covers 85%, I believe still, but no labor and equipment costs. Whereas CFGA only covers 70%, but also covers 70% of your labor and equipment costs. So quite often it works out to be cash flow positive. Okay, let's say you buy $10,000 worth of fencing and water system materials, right, equipment. Okay, then you run your tractor and you estimate your tractor and your post pounder and your pickup and your quad and your labor, and you come up with $10,000 worth of labor. Okay, that's 20 grand. They'll pay 70% of both. That's 7 grand out of this one, 7 grand out of that one. You just got 14 grand back. You only put out 10. This is positive cash flow. I've never seen it this good. And I tell you, when Ardar is already open, when CFJ opens up too, the money's going to go fast, really fast, because there's a lot of producers that have heard about this now, and it's going to jump. So you got to have your grazing plan done. The hard part of the CFGA one is you have to have an adequate grazing plan. Putting one cross fence up isn't going to do it. I made sure that we're going to sequester carbon if we're doing this. If we're putting money out for carbon sequestration, you better be sequestering carbon. Okay? So one fence doesn't cut it. Your grazing plan has to be approved by our committee. And if we like it, you get the money. If we don't, we'll send it back to you and tell you what you need to improve. Because I want to give you the money. I really do. This is your carbon tax dollar. Okay? But there's lots of funding programs out there. RELP is an awesome program too. If you don't like the off-calf deals, look at RELP. There's also Alice, who's doing riparian area management. There's all sorts of money out there. Yes?
We just signed on last week with off-calf. Our mentor, does he work then with you?
Through CFGA?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm actually the lead mentor. I'm training mentors, so I'm not a mentor, but I've built the program. There's an online version of it. You can sign up, and there's like a 6-hour course you can take for free. It's free. It's called the Advanced. If you go to the CFJ website, it's under programs called Advanced Grazing System. Okay, and you can sign up for it. You can go through the course. We're just in the process of upgrading it. You're going to get to hear more than just my voice after a while. We're going to upgrade it with some other people teaching some of the modules. So, Canadian Forage and Grassland Association. Okay, they're administering off-calf in Quebec, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC for the grazing component. So, okay, so any questions? Any more questions? Yes.
Wondering about your winter grazing, what you do for actually like biomass and water.
Winter grazing. What do we do for biomass and for water? I don't have any grain land, so I am reliant on other producers. I usually get a phone call when they have a wreck, because now I'm a market for them. And mostly it's my one grain farmer, but I've worked with multiple over the past. So it'll be a wreck. It'll be the oats that didn't mature. It'll be barley that had second growth. It'll be pea straw residue or barley residue, something like that. So that's whatever I get. Then I might have to supplement accordingly. For water systems, ideally, I love snow. Easiest, best water for me, and the best environmental option. I'm going to tell you why. This is a lot of people don't know this. Right now, where we're swath grazing, it's a wreck crop. He actually seeded alfalfa down last spring, and we had a very dry spring. Nothing germinated. All of a sudden, we got a dumping in June, middle of June, beginning of July, and everything germinated except alfalfa. So there's oats and barley and flax and canola and a lot of thistle, a lot of wild oats, but he said it was his ugly mess. And it was right by the highway, so he asked me if I'd come graze it. I said, well, I can't really right now, but I can this fall. So he said, well, it's by the, it looks bad, I'm just gonna go swath it. So he cut it, now it's in swaths. So it's all this nice polyculture, right? Awesome polyculture. But it looks prettier now because it's in swaths. So I did the same field about 5-6 years ago. Because I'm right by the highway, I know that I'm going to get calls, right? SPCA is going to get numerous calls, and I got to make sure it looks good, food out there. I put extra hay bales right at the gate just so they can see there's hay sitting there. Make sure I got a water system, right? So this particular year, this was 4 or 5 years ago, I had 3 quarters to graze of this pea straw residue. Started at the end of October, went through November, got through December, went into January, and I showed up at the gate one day, and here's this notice to contact. Please call the SPCA. I'm like, oh, there we go. And I was prepared for this. I was expecting this, right? So I phone him up, and he answers. I said, what took you so long? He's like, what? Steve Kenyon here. You left me a notice to contact. I'm the guy grazing cattle on Highway 44. He goes, oh, yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah, no, this is more of a courtesy call. I just wanted to let you know we're getting a lot of phone calls about you. But I've been out there, I've been watching you since October. I see that you have water. I see that you have hay. The cows look they're in good condition. And But I just wanted to let you know, we're getting about 100 phone calls a week about you. Wow, the earth needs saving, eh? There's so many people out there wanting to save these poor cows that are being neglected. However, because I had a water system, the same spot for 4.5 months, what did it look like around the water system? And this grain land in that area is very flat land. Guess what happened in end of March when the snow melted? I destroyed an ecosystem. All that manure and urine flushed into this dugout that there was actually live fish in there before. In the middle of winter, I'd show up there and they went through the pumping system and there's fish swimming around in my trough. Right? I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Guess what happened by May? Dead. The whole thing looked like a slurry pit, that dugout. I ruined an ecosystem. If I didn't have water, where would all that manure and urine be? Spread out all over that field. Right? If I'm not by the highway, snow. 100% snow. Now, it's got to be decent snow. I got to have a backup plan. Right? This year, well, we needed water for the first month. We got snow now, but for the first while, we needed water. So we were pumping. But because we're right by the highway, we're still pumping. Right? We're getting manure in that crowding over there again. We're set up a little bit better. I hope it doesn't run in, not near as much, but there's 2 dugouts there. The other one's still safe. But that was a huge environmental disaster just because we had to have water. So, did I answer a question? I don't remember what your question was. Sorry. Squirrel. Fences, I put up a 2-wire high tensile wood post as a perimeter. I can slam that up in a weekend, or right now my hired hand slams it up in a weekend. And then we do cross fencing. We'll do some wood posts and some step-ins. I'd like to use 2 wires because that gives me the option of using a bipolar fencer. If all of a sudden in the wintertime my fence isn't putting out enough power, then I can switch, the ground is too insulated because it's frozen, it's not the fencer's fault, then I can do a bipolar fencer, which runs half the power out as a positive vibe on one wire and half the power out as a negative charge on the second wire, and then they hit them together, they get a full charge. But better for winter. Sorry, the question was, what do we use for fence? Yes?
Can you speak to the condition of your cows when they're just on snow, or water source?
Can I speak to the condition of the cows when they're on a water source, or snow as a water source?
Right, yeah, I tried it this winter and I was kind of unsure about the condition of the cows. Like, I thought they were almost losing condition.
Okay, so what class of stock do you have out there is a big deal, right? Cow-calf pairs, they're milking. They need more water, right? You might want to make sure that they have a water source. Dry cows, if there's a lot of snow on the swath, right? They're grazing, they're eating. They're probably getting 60% of their moisture requirement just by grazing, and then they got to lick 40%. I'm just picking numbers. But body condition depends on how experienced the cows are. I've done this with dry cows. I've done this with heifers, bred heifers. They've all done fine. Now, it depends on the experience of the cattle and the quality of the snow. Worst scenario I've ever done, I had a neighbor who said, yeah, we graze snow all the time. He went away to Hawaii for the winter and hired me to take care of it. He said, don't use the wells because we're very slow wells. We need to save that for calving and in the springtime. So I wasn't allowed to use the water wells. We got down to where there was hardly any snow left. They would be eating ice crystals, and they did fine. What I would do is every morning when I drove out there, the north slopes of the hills still had snow on them and very hard crystals. So what I'd do is I'd went and drove on it, like took a little swipe with my truck. And then when you'd, underneath that ice, when it was broke up, it was like small little balls of hail. And after they were done grazing, they would line up where I drove and they would be eating ice crystals. They did fine. Those were experienced cows though. They did it all the time. I wouldn't take a brand new set of cows that had never done it and try that's for sure. But nice snow, nice fluffy snow, they do fine. I got a great picture, 2 hoof prints in the snow, and then this beautiful artwork of where she was licking. And she got that one, and then she did this one, and it was just this gorgeous little artwork. It's beautiful, yeah. Good to go? Are we on time? I wasn't even paying attention. Good, good. Awesome. Thank you very much.